Nothing leaves quite the same taste in your mouth as seeing something you once cherished as a child being defiled by greedy corporations for the sake of money. Though, to be honest, nowadays we do get that taste rather often, don't we?
Long enough, Galadriel.
Pardon me, folks, it seems we have something weird going on. Let me just reset the system real quick and I'll get right back to you. The first time I ever truly recall that disgust was the day I got my hands on a copy of Supreme Commander 2. This is gonna ruffle some feathers, but to hell with it. I abhor Supreme Commander 2 with more passion than I could ever muster for my academic career.
Warning. Toxicity detected.
What? Who the hell are you supposed to be, and what are you doing in my systems?
I am the regulator. I am here to keep this video respectful to all audiences and viewpoints.
Wait, what? So you are telling me I am not allowed to openly criticize something I care for anymore?
Toxicity will not be tolerated.
Give me back my stream, you damn tin can. Now, this might not sound like it makes a lot of sense, but Supreme Commander 2 is simultaneously the best rated, yet most, despised strategy game you can probably still find for sale. As much as it pains me, for the sake of this video, I am going to try to shelve my bias and hatred for it just long enough to narrate why such a notable strategy game franchise died such an ignoble death. This is the tragedy of how Supreme Commander 2 ended the franchise. Our tale begins in the late 1980s with a man known as Chris Taylor, a man of action, man of vision. At that time, he was just a young man working at a Canadian software company called Distinctive Software. The first game he had the opportunity to work on was Hardball 2, a baseball video game that by 1990 got released on the IBM, Macintosh, and Amiga platforms. Not exactly a groundbreaking game, but all good stories need to start somewhere, I guess. A much better opportunity arrived in 1996 when he jumped over to Cave Dog Entertainment, where he got the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to lead development of a new strategy game to be called Total Annihilation. Now, if you're not much of a strategy nerd like I am, I doubt you'll be all that knowledgeable about it. In short, Total Annihilation is one of the holy pinnacles of the real-time strategy genre, and stands right up there with the original Command & Conquer, Age of Empires, Warcraft, and even StarCraft. Following its positive reception, Total Annihilation would get 2 expansion packs, the Core Contingency and Battle Tactics. Unfortunately, Atari held the rights to the name, and we all know what happened to them. But the success of Total Annihilation had the gears in Taylor's heads a-churn. What if you took the Total Annihilation formula and made it bigger? Much, much, much bigger. Truly a revelation of a madman. After all, modern computers and all their technological might could never hope to accomplish such a goal. Instead, Taylor, alongside some of his buddies, would go on to found a new studio called Gas Power Games, where he would lead development on a few games I'm not going to discuss here. But come 2005, those gears were still a-churnin'. After all, Moore's Law was still in effect and processing power was growing at a staggering rate. Why the hell could they not just make Total Annihilation, but on a much bigger scale?
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
And so, they got to work. Following 2 years of development and some major technical sorcery on their part, Supreme Commander released in 2007 to good reviews and adoring strategy fans. And by the end of that same year, the game would get a standalone expansion called Forged Alliance. To be brutally honest, it was not a pretty game by any stretch. Tiberium Wars released in the same time period and had significantly better graphics by comparison. But the thing that carried Supreme Commander was the unmatched gameplay. Where other strategy games could be described as tactical, Supreme Commander can be described as strategic. In short, despite being a bit of an ugly duckling, Forged Alliance's gameplay is to this day second to none. Many, including myself, consider Forged Alliance to be the apex of the real-time strategy genre. Unfortunately, that title comes with a few major drawbacks, most notably accessibility. A 45-degree wheelchair ramp is more accessible than this game. Name me another strategy game where you can split your screen to micro shit better. At that time, strategy game fans were not that populous of a species, and amongst that already small demographic, hardcore real-time strategy fans, which Forged Alliance primarily appealed to, were in even smaller supply. Now, another factor that you need to be aware of is the fact that Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance were published by THQ. For you youngins who don't know what THQ was, it was one of the first mega publishers of video games ever. Imagine modern EA or Activision Blizzard of the time. But the one thing that set THQ apart from these modern assholes is the fact that they were a lot more lenient with developers than they probably should have been. As long as a developer could deliver half-decent games on time, they could literally not care less. Which is the entire reason they went bankrupt in 2013. RIP THQ, you will be missed. However, before THQ had a chance to kick the bucket, Gas-Powered Games decided to find a new publisher for their games. In 2008, Square Enix announced that they would be partnering with Gas-Powered Games to release Supreme Commander 2. Fans frankly did not give a flying crap who were publishing the game, as long as they got a new Supreme Commander game, they were cheering from the rafters. And then Supreme Commander 2 actually released. How do I put this? Let's just say, Supreme Commander 2 was a very different beast than anyone was expecting. Where Supreme Commander had been an evolution of the RTS genre, Supreme Commander 2 was, for lack of a better term, a devolution. The overall scope of the game had been drastically cut back, and it was built on a new engine with a new art direction. A strikingly similar comparison is that between Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. But where Dark Souls 2's failure was not changing the game enough, Supreme Commander 2's greatest crime was implementing changes which no one wanted. To illustrate this effect better, let's look at one of the most famous units in Supreme Commander, the Cybran Armored Command Unit. This is what the Cybran ACU looked like in Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance. Tough, menacing, and evil looking, liable to stab you in the back at the first possible opportunity. This is what we were expecting from the sequel, a freaking cool mech with big ass guns. Instead, we got this piece of junk. Just look at how they murdered my boy. Again? How do you keep doing that?
Warning. Repeated violations of the community guidelines regarding toxic behavior will result in the termination of your data.
I knew that system update was suspiciously large. Hold on, folks, I'll be right back with you. Let me just sort this out. Similarly, both the Aeon and the UEF also underwent rather sizable aesthetic shifts. If it were just the surface level changes, that would be completely fine, but Gas-Powered Games made some very interesting creative decisions regarding the gameplay itself.
Now, obviously still a big focus on kind of the large scale as with the first Supreme Commander, but has that changed in focus? Like, has it gotten any bigger? Has it gotten any smaller? Have there been any kind of adjustments to that?
Well, there is definitely a focus in the way the game plays. We have fewer units, but we've added the entire tech tree. That allows you to make all these combinations with the units, which creates a lot of replayability and stuff like that. We dropped some of the little fiddly little things. We dropped coordinated attack. Nobody used it. We have some changes to our economy that we think are for the better, so we've made the economy more easily people can learn it faster, but really just have more fun, and it's less tricky, but all in a good way. So improvements that we think people will really embrace.
So, not only did the game not look like its predecessors, it also did not play like them either. A recipe for disaster. Here, the narrative tends to devolve into two differing stories concerning what happened to the game during development. Frankly, I have no idea as to which one is the truth, so I'll leave it up to you guys as the viewers. Option A. After signing up with Square Enix, Gas-Powered Games were coerced by their new publisher into making the game more accessible for a larger audience. Or Option B. Chris Taylor himself decided to scale down the scope of the game as to make it more friendly to new players. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, their grand attempt to make the game more accessible backfired to hell when they decided to release the game on the aging Xbox 360, which was a whopping 5 years old at that point. And yes, before you go off in the comments, Supreme Commander had in fact been released on the Xbox 360 back in 2008. But where that had been just a port of the PC game, Supreme Commander 2 was built with console in mind. Where they tried to improve the graphics, they ended up being unable to run it on the hardware of the 360. If they tried to improve the scope and gameplay, it might not work on a controller setup. In essence, the vision for a sequel ran polar opposite to their limitations on the 360. Ignoring the fact that it was a bad idea from the start, 2 added insult to injury by making some truly mind-bogglingly bad creative decisions.
Dear user, for your repeated violations of the community guidelines.
Okay, that should be the end of that. You know what? To hell with a non-biased approach. From here on out, this video is gonna be a rant. The entire progression system, which only needed you to count to 3, was replaced with this free-to-play style research tree that only requires a sum total of 3 brain cells to use. Said tech trees were also substantially shrank down, meaning there were a lot less units available for the player to use. The fan-favorite Seraphim faction from Forge Alliance got their asses Thanos-snapped out of existence. All of the maps were scaled down to accommodate the performance limitations of the 360. The ability to add substantial but mutually exclusive upgrades to your commander were greatly dumbed down. Experimentals got downgraded through the floor. You've heard of a glow up. This shit was a dimmed down. I will never forgive them for what they did to the UEF Fat Boy. Production assist was limited to 3 engineers maximum. No longer could you fast-track unit production into the stratosphere. Build assist, another core mechanic, was completely removed. Only 1 engineer could now only build 1 structure at a time. Adjacency bonuses, arguably the most unique core mechanic of Supreme Commander, was completely torn out. Gunships are horrifically overpowered, and anti-air guns are about as useful as Italians throwing meatballs at the sky. Nukes are much cheaper than in Forge Alliance, and you get exactly what you pay for. Heal generators are not worth the power they piss off into the void. Everything in the economy is now based on a pay upfront model. No longer can you go so far into the negative that you make the American economy blush. Mass extractors now passively upgrade themselves. So slowly. The Aeon faction somehow does not have a naval tech tree anymore. Like, where did it go? 2 words. Wonky. Pathfinding. Artillery got done very dirty. Where once you shat your pants at the sights of shells flying, now they are barely any inconvenience. Strategic missile launchers and strategic defenses are just plain weird now. Want some Jurassic Park? Too bad, we have Jurassic Park at home. And last but not least, they took my favorite unit from the whole damn series, the Cybran Tech 3 battleship, and replaced it with a freaking tugboat. Just why? Now, I must admit that a lot of these aforementioned systems did have major issues as they were implemented in Supreme Commander and Forged Alliance. But there was zero, null, negative reasons to tear them all out, root and stem. Point is, Supreme Commander 2 led to a schism forming in the community, with older fans absolutely despising it for the absolute betrayal it rightfully was, but with some new fans loving it for the decently average strategy game it actually is. The sad part is that it's not a bad strategy game, it was just mediocre, like a cheap vegan meal bought on accident. If Supreme Commander 2 was your first strategy game, I have no doubt you will remember it fondly. But if you played either Supreme Commander or Forged Alliance beforehand, you will most likely not have that opinion. From the sources I could find, Supreme Commander 2 was not a financial flop. But, big but, it was not nearly the success that Square Enix had been bargaining on. Oh, and by the way, when Gaspard Games signed up with Square, they happened to accidentally sign over the IP rights for the franchise going forwards. Good freaking luck trying to convince Square to make a Supreme Commander game during this live service day and age. And no, THQ Nordic does not appear to own the publishing rights to SC1 and Forge Alliance anymore. Freaking skin bandits. Thankfully, there is some hope for Supreme Commander fans. Forge Alliance Forever is a fan-made client that can be used to reactivate Forge Alliance's long-dead multiplayer servers. If you ever enjoyed Forge Alliance, or if you just like old strategy games in general, give Forever a shot and you can thank me later. Thanks for sticking with me to the very end. It has got to be rough listening to this idiot yapping away for a good 15 minutes straight. If you enjoy the video, I would highly appreciate a comment. But just before you go, I have an announcement to make. Fuck Supreme Commander 2 with a rusty spoon. I don't care if you like it, by all means you do you, but in my opinion and from my own personal experience, it was the biggest letdown since the day I mistook a Vegemite sandwich for a Nutella one. Hope to see you guys around again. Cheers.